And I'm David Foster. I'm the CEO of Business Valuation Resources, and I'm included on this panel because we have a track record of 47 straight IT projects that haven't worked. So I'm here to help out.
You need some transformation, Molly.
Yeah. But we're agile.
Right.
That's the key thing. We're really fast at not working. But I actually was sort of blown away when I was not involved in recruiting the two individuals to my left. When they were sort of presented to me, I thought I'd walked into the world-class organization. But two folks who met at McGraw-Hill back when McGraw-Hill was one company. We had Ziff Davis background, but David Aldea, you can see from Wiley, and Richard Bellinger from ProQuest, who are both very active IT transformation programs going on. So this is a chance to, I think, really dive down into what's going on. So because both Wiley and ProQuest are involved in so many changes, what I thought would be best is that we each took 3 to 5 minutes or whatever to describe what's changing on the IT side, how it's affecting the business models and those sort of things. So we'll kick off with that, and then a series of questions and debate and stuff like that. So.
Okay, great. Well, I'm Rich Belanger, and very happy to be here. So in terms of technology transformation, what's going on at ProQuest, I guess we have the opposite experience. I've been with the company for 3 years. I was recruited as CIO to actually fix some of those sort of technology problems. So I think we've had 47 straight technology projects that have been delivered on time and on budget. So
he's not a nice person.
No, you can be nice. Yeah. But for people who aren't familiar with ProQuest, we're a large information aggregator. So we ingest content from 20,000 publishers all over the world. We digitize content, sometimes going back to the 1200s. And we make all of that content available in online services for libraries and academic institutions all over the world. So at any given, at any given time, right now we've got about 1 billion documents up in our main archives, a couple of billion documents discoverable through other partners, and we have 70 million uniques annually. So decent size footprint, petabytes of content, and technology is really at the heart of everything we do. Almost all of our revenue comes from digital products, so no print, no little microfilm left over from back in the day. But we're in the last 3 years, we've really embraced a few things that have driven our technology transformation. The first is adopting agile development, and agile, a really strict agile approach, along with something that we call the definition of done. So you talk to agile practitioners sometimes, and everything goes really fast, but then you deliver things that don't actually work or that don't meet the needs. For us, it was a combination of agile and that definition of done that really made all the difference. So that if engineers are now personally accountable for the code that they're delivering working in production. And if it doesn't, then actually lights go off outside my office and we track them down and beat them mercilessly. The second thing that's really helped us on our transformation is we've actually integrated all of the content and all the technology teams together under me. So that we used to have editorial and content groups and technology groups, and they didn't always work very effectively together. By integrating them together and by having a more, and this is my bias coming through, a more technology-focused leadership, we've been able to drive transformation of the way we ingest content and enrich content in ways that we couldn't have done a few years ago. Probably the third area is cloud computing. We do a lot of stuff in cloud, and we do a lot of stuff in public cloud. And we're moving most of our system environments into public cloud. I've got 16 production systems in public cloud today, and more going every quarter or two. So that combination has allowed us to be very effective. I would say that the thing that also drives all of that, though, is a real strong underlying focus on customer research and understanding the customers. So our engineers go out and meet customers. We bring in customers to spend time with our engineering teams. And everything that we do is really very, very, very customer focused and not mediated through 10 layers of bureaucracy. So with that, I'll turn it over to my colleague, David.
That's great. Thanks, Rich. So I'm David Aldea. Very similar story, actually, in a whole bunch of areas. Rich and I did work together back in the McGraw-Hill days. He was with J.D. Power and Associates, right, which was a company owned by McGraw-Hill, and I was leading their digital transformation strategy at the time. So we've got a couple war stories that we could share from there as well, if you like. And so I was brought on to Wiley about 3 years ago, and it was kind of an interesting time for Wiley. It was a bit of a tipping point. The board had recognized, and the board, it's still a family-run company, publishing company, probably worth saying a little bit about what they do. Most of their publishing, most of their margin, most of their revenue is from higher academic publishing, journal publishing. Anybody who's doing their PhD has got to get an article written, peer-reviewed, and then published, and then people subscribe to the journals in which those journals are published. So that's a large portion of our business. We do have a higher education business as well, and an e-learning business. We own the dummies. A lot of people know us for owning the dummies. Anything for dummies is Wiley as well. So we do have some small consumer side publications, but most of it is higher education and journal publishing. So Wiley is a publicly traded company, but the Wileys themselves are very active in it. Peter Wiley himself serves as chairman of the board and is walking the hallowed hallways often. And about 3 years ago, the board said, we have to pivot very quickly. We see on the horizon what they called an existential threat to the publishing business, to anybody that was hanging on dearly to paper publishing, and journal publishing was obviously highly paper-oriented. So the entire technology leadership team was replaced, and I was brought in along with 6 or 7 of my colleagues. We also, at the time, combined content management and content technology along with technology, recognizing that you cannot have one really without the other. And at the same time, we centralized a lot of our shared services as well. So why threat, right? What forced the board to make such a radical decision? Our customers all of a sudden became intolerant of not having the content in the form that they wanted, with the frequency that they wanted, with the updates that they wanted, on the device that they wanted, et cetera, et cetera. They wanted it when they wanted it and where they wanted it. That's a stark contrast from receiving a journal once a month in the mail. And what this does, it turns the business model upside down, brings a whole bunch of questions to light. Will people pay for a digital version of paper, the same that they would have paid otherwise? Will advertisers pay the same for a digital ad that they would have paid to have an ad on the back cover of a print product, right? The answer to both of those questions is no, initially, until you start to think about some value-add products that you can add around the PDF, if you will, to make it worthwhile for customers who want to consume content that way. So we really did a rethink and embraced rapid prototyping, embraced what I call user-driven design and user-driven prototyping and development. We no longer develop anything for market unless it's been thoroughly prototyped and market tested first. Not one line of code is spent oftentimes before a business case is even developed. We encourage people to fail quickly, to try ideas, to spend a little bit of money up front will save you a lot of money down the road if you miss the mark. We test our pricing models. We do everything well in advance before we go to even marketing or build mode. And that was a big radical transformation for us as well. And we can talk, I'm not sure the backgrounds of the groups, et cetera, but I guess we both encourage you guys to ask questions as you go along. We can get as technical or as propellerhead as you like, or we can go as strategic as you like as well. So whatever the group wants.
I think there are a lot of programming geeks in the audience.
Propellerhead.
So I would say just go right into the, a lot of publishers here. Can I, go ahead, Ray.
I have a question about that. If you're prototyping and user and market testing before you write a line of code, are you basically doing that with wireframes?
We did it with wireframes. Wireframes Plus I would say. So wireframes tend to be a little bit abstract in nature. You don't get the full impact of focus groups with just mini mock-ups, if I can call it that. So we've done sort of semi-functional HTML prototypes. Costs almost the same to do it. You need a little bit more design feedback into it. But the interesting thing, if I had a whiteboard here, I would draw you a curve. And so just imagine, just draw with me for a second. On the left axis is how well the business knows what they want, okay? And on the right axis is how ready the technologists are to build, right? The problem is in this business, we force the business, or the business forces us to estimate long before we understand exactly what they need us to build. Right? Yeah. And it tips us over time and time and time again because you commit to a timeline to a customer that is not reasonable, or you completely financially underestimate the cost of the build, or you completely underestimate the time that it's going to take to build, right? And so unless you can, and the problem is, especially when you're a publicly traded company and you've got quarterly results and all those kinds of things, right? There's this culture of having a bulletproof business case before you spend any money on a project. And in reality, you got to spend a bit of money to know what the project really is. And this is a big cultural change that we had to institute at Wiley that I forced into the organization. And what does that mean financially? You got to have some honeypots of cash built into your budget that is OPEX, not CAPEX, right? To get accounting geek for you for a second, right? That you can spend and sometimes hire external agencies to do some design work for you, et cetera, and test and retest, and that's okay. And if none of those prototypes work out, that's okay too, right? But one of them is going to work, and you're gonna nail it because you knew up front, right?
Yeah, and I would agree. Our experience has been very similar. I think we have the advantage that our market tends to be maybe a little, we're out interacting with them a lot, so there's probably a little bit more information that we tend to know. But prototyping and prototyping up front to uncover the features of the product. I think of software development, and I'm an engineer by background. It's a bit like architecture, right? If an architect goes and designs you a house and shows you a bunch of plans, most people cannot really relate to that and have a sense of, am I really going to like the kitchen? Does the flow into the pool work for me? That's why architects build models, right? And for us as engineers, that's why we build prototypes, because most people are not very good at interacting with abstract things like wireframes and requirements, and those 200-page requirements documents people love to write. Those are useless. You can stop writing those tomorrow and save yourself some time, because just throw them away.
Could you maybe just, because in both the terms of the way you've changed the model, there are accounting impacts, and this is a little different direction based on Brad's question, but is there anything, because I think everybody in this room is dealing to one degree or another with these exact same issues, like how do you resource? Is there anything you can say just about the metrics of rapid prototyping, agile, the financial implications of the honeypots? So any numbers you can throw around there, or how you describe it to your team or to senior management when you're at a board meeting?
Sure. I mean, look, I've been an advocate, and we all fall into this trap during budget and planning time. I'm a CPA as well by background, so I'm a bit of a numbers geek to go with it. There is a tendency to forecast and to budget based on 100% utilization. And that is not practical, and it's not realistic, and it leads to doom down the road, right? For the simple reason that you cannot accurately predict during planning and forecasting time exactly where the business is going to go or what the business is going to need. There's always going to be that big customer that comes in the door that all of a sudden is going to consume some development or technology resource. And where's it going to come from? It's going to have to come from something else, right? And so what does that do? It has immediate impact on all the rest of the product roadmaps, and then now customers are upset and all the. So if you want a metric, I wouldn't forecast utilization of technology resources or technology development resources beyond 80%.
And
Wow.
for us, we adopted a whole different model because we used to do the very specific project budgeting, but it turns out not to be especially helpful. So we actually have, for most of our products, we've gone to what we call a level of effort model, where we'll budget for the team size that we want to have based on the capacity of a particular part of the business to invest. It then becomes a prioritization exercise, divorced from the budget of where we spend our time.
Yeah.
Now, does that work for everything? No, there are times when we actually have to do, go off and do something specific. But it removes for 90% of the projects that can run through the existing resource envelope, it removes all that budget friction and drama and hand-wringing. I would say on utilization, the other thing that has helped us a lot, and I will admit that we are maybe 50 or 60% of where I'd like to be on this, but we actually have, in our Agile environment, we have our product owners, product managers, and designers doing sprints in advance of our engineering sprints, so that as the product owners and designers finish up a designy sort of sprint, the engineers are then finishing up their sprint and they're ready to take it on, so that we don't get as much downtime in that model. There's always something for them to work on. I wouldn't say that we get to 100% utilization, because I would agree with David. That's just fantasy land. It never happens. I'd like to say that we're we're closer to the high 80s, but depending on the group, that I could be off a little bit.
Are there metrics, and Dan,
and we're private, by the way, so it makes that aspect makes things a little bit easier. So we're not doing quarterly reporting in a public fashion.
Are there metrics around just again the agile environment and stuff like that, and I'm thinking really, because I'm sure there's more pressure than ever on both of you to sort of say what I'd call like a product inception to first revenues metric.
Sure.
What are you hearing and what are you thinking around those areas? Because again, that's come up in a bunch of sessions so far. So,
well, certainly we do projects that are so varied that it's hard to come up with a good metric. For some of our smaller things, we could have something in market and released in 4 weeks.
Yeah.
Something gigantic could take a year and a half. We do look at metrics like Agile story points, some of the more engineering metrics. Certainly, I meet with the board all the time, and the board looks to me for metrics on technology effectiveness, and we demonstrate a lot of projects delivered, delivered on time, that sort of thing. That tends to help. That tends to go very far, and they don't want to. If I can go and say we delivered 80 things this year and we hit all of our targets or most of our targets, no one hits all, then that tends to make the conversation go a lot better.
Yeah, that's a much happier board meeting. Yeah.
I've been in the others.
Yeah.
Those are not fun.
Those are less fun.
Those are not fun.
Yeah, Dan, you
I
would
was to stay with the accounting thing, and Richard, you said you're moving a lot of things to the public cloud, right?
Yes.
And so, with that, is that moving kind of CapEx to OpEx in that situation? And how do you deal with that from a financial reporting and kind of board?
Yeah. So part of the whole cloud thing was actually teeing this up for, this is public, so we actually just did a bit, we're mainly owned by a family, but we also have a private equity investor, and our new private equity investor is Goldman Sachs. So spending time with the Goldman people and explaining the whole cloud thing is actually relatively straightforward. We actually did a very detailed financial model going out N number of years on our cloud transformation, where we showed our CapEx and some of our internal personnel costs going down, data center costs going down. And then we also introduced, and this gets a little bit geeky, but we also introduced some optionality with Forrester, and full disclosure, I'm former CIO of Forrester, so I'm a little bit biased. But Forrester has a TEI model using that you can calculate the value of optionality in technology investments. So we use some of that as well. Though it turns out that we actually didn't need the optionality calculations. But yes, going to public cloud, can dramatically affect your CapEx and drives up OpEx, of course. But it also drives up your flexibility to respond to things quickly.
Yeah, but that would obviously have the effect of hurting a quarter. You could be in trouble at the board meeting with that change.
Well, if it's socialized beforehand and everyone understands what we're doing, then it's totally fine. At least in my environment. Yes.
How do you manage performance when it goes to the cloud? Are there services you use, or how do you...
We do a bunch of different things. To be honest, our cloud performance is totally awesome. We actually use a lot of the same technical tools that we use to manage performance of our in-house environments. We just launched one of our big products is a discovery service, the Summon discovery service. We just launched Summon into the public cloud, and we're using all the same tools to manage it, all the same tools to understand underlying performance, and to measure the customer's experience of performance, which ultimately is the most important thing to us. But I could spend all day talking about cloud optimization, and I'd be happy to afterwards.
Yeah, but along with the cloud, I mean, we've had tremendous upside performance from leveraging Akamai, especially in a lot of our international locations as well, along with it. So.
Yeah, we use Akamai as well for last mile optimization.
It's transformative. It really is.
You spell it?
Yeah.
Akamai.
We had a question back here.
Most of my questions were answered. I'm sure if I agree with it. I can see the cloud being useful for, I'm a startup, I'm in my cellar, and I have my tech guy, and all of a sudden I can have my infrastructure built overnight. But if you're an established company, you have your data centers with probably like a 20-year investment going on. It seems like spinning up some virtual servers to do some additional things, the marginal cost to grow that infrastructure compared to the cost of putting something in Amazon or whatever public cloud you're talking about. I don't see the break point.
He's not a believer.
He's not a believer. Yeah.
He's a hater.
Yeah.
He's a hater. Why do you got to be such a hater?
Yeah.
I mean, if you're Amazon, you're dealing with the big Christmas crunch. Having the elastic demand there. Yeah, I can see you needing that to cloud for, but if it's just an everyday normal kind of action.
Well, if you had a business where every day was exactly the same and you could predict with absolute accuracy what your performance was going to look like in 2 years, 3 years out, I could probably agree with you to some extent. I will say that what we see in public cloud environments is the costs of running things in the public cloud, just even for base, what I would refer to as base load kind of scenarios, tend to be lower. And why is that? Because Amazon's getting way better prices on servers, disks, networking than we are, and they're leveraging just a huge scale economy that we can't. Now, just to put AWS in perspective, and you mentioned the e-commerce site, they add the equivalent of the e-commerce site in capacity to AWS every week. So the AWS is far beyond what the old e-commerce environment is.
And the other thing in a lot of these analyses that is forgotten, right? If there is a steady growth of your business or a transformation of your business from print to digital, where you're starting to hockey stick up, you have to remember the step function that will eventually kick in on your own data center, right? Eventually, you're going to run out of power. Yeah. Or you're going to run out of space, right? Yeah. And then you're going to have to deal with lease renewals, and the landlord's going to have your back against a wall, and because they know you're not going to want. I mean, there's a ton of reasons outside of the core analysis, unless you actually look long enough out and can predict the growth of the business really accurately, that make the existing model just almost unsustainable.
I'll give you an example. We just launched a large 10, 20 terabyte data warehouse, usage data warehouse. To do that traditionally would have taken us 9 months to get the hardware purchased. We had the whole thing up, running, live, and serving customers in 90 days in AWS. So the value of time to market in public cloud is also just tremendous.
And
it's also costing us far less than it would the whole project is costing us less than the hardware purchase.
Well, the excess capacity is far less.
Yeah.
Phil?
Okay.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, we'll stop beating on you now.
But if you're still in the basement, I think you're okay for a little while before you're... Phil, did you?
Slightly different subject.
Yeah. And then...
To what extent are security, investments in security impacting your budgets?
It's an excellent question. So you mean from a cyber threat perspective? So we have been the victim of a massive cyber breach, which is public knowledge, perpetrated by people that I can actually show you their picture. And they're from Russia and they're from China. I can bring you to their website where it says, please donate $20 and you can get all the Wiley content you want for free. Right? And what they've done is and they don't care, right? And what they've done is they've gone to, just to give you an idea of how bad this is, to our library customers who have all-you-can-drink kind of contracts, and it just reroutes the request to a different server from an authenticated server, right? And then they just start taking one by one, article, journal article, et cetera, and they start building up their database, and boom, another site pops up. We actually went to the FBI, and they said, yeah, but you know, the State Department doesn't really want to ruffle Putin right now over this. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that you're dealing with. So they're totally unhelpful at this point. And eventually, of course, you have to invest in shutting things down and strengthening your security. So we've had to take this very seriously. We do everything from having external security audits now on a regular basis to regularly monitoring. We've actually looked at our business models and changed our license agreements so that we've actually had to put in throttling mechanisms in case there's these big spikes in downloads or something like that. You know, at the end of the day, you can put in your end user license agreement that if they are breached, right? So the breach often doesn't happen on your end, it'll happen on your customer's end. Then theoretically you have the right to cancel their contract. You're never really going to do that, right? You don't want to cancel their contract, but you got to require them to take some remedial action and all of that sort of thing. So it's a very serious and complicated issue for the publishing industry right now, and there's not a lot of support from the authorities.
I would, you know, I'm very familiar with David's breach since we've been involved in some similar investigations. So we've also had to ratchet up our security spending as well. Some of the same sorts of things, and where we see breaches, they're not really with our systems, but we see, you know, since we operate and sell into the academic market, that, you know, academic systems are relatively easy to compromise. It's also, though, a little bit hard for us to distinguish at times because, you know, we see customers who want to do data mining. Data mining is big in the academic space. How do you tell someone who's data mining you from someone who's, you know, harvesting all your content to host in Iran? You know, they kind of look the same. So we actually, I don't think that we haven't been super public about this, but we've actually invested in some machine learning algorithms where we actually have a machine learning system that monitoring our usage in real time and able to take a variety of different actions, from throttling usage to throwing up a CAPTCHA to you know, turning off their access. You know, we're still working on the link to the Air Force to take them out, but
to the drone, right? Directly to the drone.
Right. Yeah. Technically, we could do it, but we don't have the drone.
And then there's the third avenue, by the way, where the students themselves will sell their user ID and password, right? Because they're trying to raise money.
Yeah, we actually went out and did some work, and we found a whole bunch of user credentials available on the web where students were selling access, and so we take those down. And but so the answer is, I think anyone who's who's doing, you know, heavy web publishing at scale has security problems, and our spending is going up on security. This is something we socialize with the board, and you know, they're big boys and girls, and they know that that's what's happening. But I don't really see an end in sight. There is no successul outcome that stops, you know, bad actors in China or Iran.
But here's the positive thing, you know, in as much as the publishing industry is very small, right? So we compete on some areas, we collaborate on other areas. We vehemently compete with others, but where cyber threat is concerned, we're all on the same side. And so whenever one of these threats comes up and are identified, it is commonplace that we would all have a conference call, the next morning with our technology heads and say, look, this is what we're seeing, what are you guys seeing? And so we all cooperate pretty effectively when it does happen.
Yeah.
And it rarely happens to just one of us.
We cooperate very effectively to the extent permitted by law.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, for cyber threats, yeah.
Yeah.
Certainly not on pricing.
Yeah. Steve, did you have a question?
When you migrated to the cloud, did your systems administrator costs go up or down? Are you still doing them yourself? Or are you buying those services from the cloud vendor?
We're not buying services from the cloud vendor. The scale that an administrator can manage dramatically increases in the cloud because there's a lot less, racking and stacking of stuff. And we need fewer people who know how to, rack servers. We need more people who know how to do, more advanced work. But that advanced population is more expensive, but significantly smaller.
But is that, Rich, because you didn't lift and shift? You
Yeah.
cleaned it up first and then?
Yes, and I probably should have elaborated on that. Just lifting and shifting. We've done lifting and shifting, and it doesn't work so well. Cleaning it up and architecting it properly for the cloud, you can get tremendous scale economies.
Simplify the stack.
Taking the physical servers, making
Yeah.
that's lifting and shifting.
That's lifting and shifting. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Simplify your technology stack if you really want to get the leverage out of the savings out of the cloud.
Yeah.
Or your maintenance and whatever budget won't change.
Richard, you had a comment about those 200-page spec documents, not doing them.
Yeah.
I help them. I used to teach pragmatic marketing, and I know both of your companies have people in.
Yep.
What do you guys look for in your partnership with product management? As I help people, so my clients trying to figure out how's that process. I'd love to get your insight on how do you want that context provided to you. Completely agree with getting the engineers out there and seeing it, but what works? Where is the best case scenario? What do you strive for?
Great question.
That's a great question.
It's a great question. So it's interesting. So we are continually refining our model, I believe, at Wiley. I'm a believer that the more stovepipes within an organization that you have, the more handoffs you're going to have, which increases documentation. It's just a matter of fact, right? So if your product management group is completely separate from your BAs, right, your business analysts, which is completely separate from your developers, which is completely separate from product managers, everybody's going to have their own checklist, everybody's going to have, right, and that's just where things start to spin up and you start to create way too much of an overhead. So we've turned the model completely upside down. We've started to look at things instead from an organizational view, from a product view, right? So a product manager will be full-time dedicated to a team which includes a BA, which includes a PM, it includes the development heads as well. And that team lives or dies based on, and is incented based on the successful launch of a product within budget and within a timeline.
There's some people in this room who use the terms sue and bill, so you may want to spell out some of the, I know it's project manager, I'm kidding,
Don't sue me.
Yeah,
okay.
Some small IT departments.
Gotcha.
So we do exactly the same thing. So if you look at our agile teams, it's a product owner, user experience, engineering, QA. They all sit together. They all work together. We actually have a little bit of a more complicated matrix reporting structure, but that turns out not to be an issue if you manage it properly, right? But what's important is those agile teams working together really, really collaboratively. So what we look for from product management is to really help us better understand the market and not, again, not at a high level.
Context on key variables.
And then iterate with us to build that vision of what we could offer and turn it into reality. There's prototyping up front. There's content licensing, which is a big thing for us.
The point on validation in the product management process, there should be that same, even before we start coding or wireframing something, there should be validation.
Absolutely.
Before that.
That's right.
And it's just trying to understand, because those handoffs become the most, humble.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, and when they're handoffs, it's a problem. When there's joint ownership, and at the end of the day, I want to look to my engineering, UX, and product owner colleagues and have them own and feel proud and feel really committed to that product. And that the model that we have now tends to foster more of that than the sort of stovepipey.
Well, enable them to be market experts.
Yeah.
So they can make the right decisions.
Well, and enable them to share, to learn from each other, right? Because if the engineers think that the product owner doesn't know what he or she is talking about, then you wind up with a really negative environment, and vice versa. They need to be able to bounce ideas off each other, and sometimes the product owner needs to win, sometimes the engineers need to win, sometimes the UX people need to win, sometimes the QA guys need to win. If one group is like winning and lording it over the others all the time, you don't really get a collaborative.
Exactly. Yeah. And co-location helps. I was just going to say co-location helps as well. I mean, the greater degree that you can embed all these people in the same area, it's much helpful.
Yeah, when I was telling David earlier, when I joined the company, we had 100 people offshore, 100 engineers offshore, and I got rid of all of them. You now have no offshore engineers, and the product owners and the engineering teams and QA all sit right together, and that's made a huge difference.
Do you have a layer of product strategy above the product owner, or how?
Yeah, we do.
The product owner 24/7 to the team.
Yeah. There's a layer of product, sort of product super owners, or we don't call them that.
Yeah. They have cool outfits.
Yeah, and capes.
Yeah.
Who do those people report to? Sales, marketing?
So the product owners all report up to heads of specific business units who have P&L responsibility. In our organization, sales and marketing is a shared service, just as technology is. And I report up to the CEO along with my colleague who runs sales, marketing, and customer experience.
We have the same model. I would caution you against having product management report into sales and marketing, only because then they're going to accept pretty much whatever timeline is going to take to get the sale, as opposed to necessarily what is doable.
And well, you wind up being coin operated, right?
Yeah.
And coin operated is no way to live.
Yeah.
Could I maybe just a slightly different direction just for a second, but you mentioned the cloud is one area where you made significant strategic changes in direction, and we've mostly been talking about product technology so far. Just step back a little bit, are you seeing other kinds of changes in the types of projects or the category of projects? And I also just broaden out to include marketing automation and sales and systems automation or any other, but just like the types of projects you're seeing coming across the desk, what trends do you see there?
For me, I own both the back end, our internal systems and product development. So about 90% of my time is on the product side, and 10% is on the other stuff.
That answers.
But we have dedicated teams who do the other stuff, and it's really important, right? If the financial systems goes down, it doesn't matter how cool our products are. I'm in big trouble. There's a balance. In terms of spending, I want to say it's probably 85% on product, and then there's some keep the lights on stuff. I don't know what you see, David.
We look at our business very much as, we call it core and explore, right? So core being the business that puts bread and butter on the table, explore being those new areas of business that are perhaps higher risk, new ideas, less incremental development, more transformational development, that sort of thing. And we treat them very differently. So the core stuff tends to have keep up with the Joneses kind of situation. What are your competitors doing? Packaged releases that are fairly well predictable, regular release, all that kind of stuff, right? The Explorer stuff is a little bit more cowboy. It can be rapid releases, tends to be more web oriented than monolithically oriented, tends to be able to rapidly respond to changing customer needs or customer demands, that sort of thing. To wrap around that whole discussion, I will say that we have put a renewed focus on really monitoring incremental development in terms of the overall business case, right? Because you can increment your way to the poorhouse if you're not careful, and oftentimes inertia. We call it inertia spending. You just kind of keep spending the same amount roughly on the same platforms every year. And should you, right? And every now and then you need to stop and say, should we, or should we dial it down, or should we start to rethink this whole thing, or are we showing a hockey stick revenue forecast, going up quickly, but we're really only coming up with small incremental ideas. Yeah. And if there's no big ideas on the roadmap, there shouldn't be big changes in revenue on the roadmap, right? And so we're really starting to kind of dive into our core more, if you will.
Yeah. And that can be an incredibly valuable exercise because we've been doing this to some extent as well, that you find there's a lot of stuff just running on autopilot.
Yep.
And you have to sometimes be a little bit ruthless and kill some of those, nice to have incremental features in product, X, Y, Z, in order to get more money to do something, transformational.
Yep.
And it does require a degree of ruthlessness.
It does. And there'll be lots of squawking.
Yeah. Well, as a forecasted model, it's really interesting to hear both of you say that same thing, because it's like if you're not seeing the big idea, you would hope, the people in the boardroom are seeing the same thing you are, and if they aren't,
it's not always put to them. It's not always explained to them that way. It's always the technology budget is often packaged up to the board as, I call it Chicken Little, right? If we don't do this, then the sky is going to fall. And it's not always true, right? And you've got to really dive into it. You'd be surprised the gold nuggets that you'll find if you spend some time there.
Yeah, I had to do that when I first joined the company. Their spending was far higher than was really sustainable. They had first of all, never do a gigantic, redo your entire platform in a gigantic aha release. That doesn't usually work out.
Never.
That's a bad, trust me on this. But I had to go through that process of cleaning out a lot of the we have to do this, we're all going to die kind of project. And again, you just have this is where having an engineering background or a CPA background can somewhat help, because when the engineers come and tell me, oh my God, we're all going to die unless we buy this fancy thing, well, no, we're not. And you just have to again, I guess, be ruthless. Maybe that's my theme today. But,
the good news, the apocalypse is not coming.
That's right.
At least in this particular
now,
form.
on the other hand, that we were talking about security a little while ago. There are some security investments, for example, where the sky could be falling. I'm thinking of some PCI compliance things. There's not a week that goes by where you don't see some retailer who probably said, oh, I can be lax about that, get nailed. And if you let those, the trick is knowing which of those the sky is falling, where the sky really could fall.
So you're sitting on a business plan, and I think this is probably comparable for everybody I know in this room, and you've got some reasonably big ideas. Let's just take that for granted. And we were fortunate enough to have two individuals like you two to deliver those, which would be really nice. What resources for you two in the next 18 months are going to be the biggest problems? Like what's going to stop you from keeping up your 47 straight successes, assuming the big ideas are there? There could be other business problems
well, for me, I think it's probably engineering talent. It's just hard to find engineering talent.
And that's the product, the engineering around the product, envisioning and design?
And design and build. And we lose people to Google, we lose people to Amazon. You probably have the same kind of thing. And it's kind of hard to compete when Google comes in with a $1 million options plan to a senior engineer, right? That's probably the biggest challenge that I see. And the way we respond to it is we're doing more of growing our own, and not necessarily counting that someone's going to be with us for 20 years. But if they can be really effective and a fantastic contributor while they're there, and we can make them more valuable, that actually works for us.
Are you doing in-house training on that?
Some in-house.
Or what other resources?
We're fortunate to be in beautiful Ann Arbor, Michigan, home of the University of Michigan. So we work with some of the local universities to build bridges there. So we constantly have people from the B school, from the computer science department that we work with, and we do things like we went off and spend a day on campus with all of my hiring managers in the engineering group doing resume reviews for CS graduates. Why would we do that? Well, because we chat with them while they're reviewing their resumes and find ones that might be interested in working for us.
Yeah. David, anything?
Yeah, I would say the same. Most of my staff is in England, Russia, and Germany. So you're dealing with sort of slightly different factors there. There is a tremendous financial services magnet, right, that seems to pull people away. So for me, it's less Google, it's more that. Startups are always sexy and exciting sounding for young people to go to. And when you look at the demographic of some of the new technologies that are coming out, these people are going to be the young people coming out of college. So that's really kind of what you're competing for the new workforce, for the new talent, for the new technologies that are coming up. So I suppose that has a lot to do with it. I guess the other thing is, what would stop me from being successful? We got to get out of our own way sometimes within my own team. You've got to, when a project needs to be shut down, shut it down, decommission it, right? Move the resources someplace else. Sometimes there is a tendency in what we all do to admire the problem for way too long. Right? You look at it from every direction. Yep, that's bad. Yeah,
that's the problem.
Don't know what. Yeah, boy, we should figure out what to do about that, right? And it goes on for. I mean, how many of you have sat in these meetings for months and months and months, and nobody does anything about it? When really, you know what needs to be done about it, right? Within the first meeting or two, you shut it down.
What was there was the expression from the keynote this morning? From can anybody remember? It said something.
Something. I remember that. Yeah, I remember that slide. First, yeah, exactly.
But there was the other one about let's. Yeah, that was good too.
That's the one that you liked.
Yeah, it was the one about let's not talk about doing something idiotic. Let's at least do the idiotic thing. Let's not just talk about it. Yeah. So anyway, sorry, I didn't mean.
But I tend to be less tolerant for that sort of thing, and I just would rather we make a decision and move on.
Well, those are good answers.
Well, and it's that sort of whole fail fast. In fact, the guy my VP of engineering, his license plate is actually fail fast.
Really?
Wow. And we are, you have to be willing to, you got to try things, right? If you don't try lots of things, you're never going to find any, you're never going to come up with any new big ideas, but you have to be willing to kill them. And like David, I do get frustrated. We do tend to want to admire a problem and explore every possible option. We had a service recently that we tried something really fantastic. It was great. We had a good hypothesis. It turned out to be wrong, and it took us longer to kill it than I would have liked. Now we did finally kill it. That was great. But you wind up. It was like a vampire. You had to stab it through the heart with a stake.
5 times. Right?
Yeah, 5 times.
It was gorgeous.
So as you're moving towards this kind of fail fast, fail cheaply model, I find, particularly within public companies, that there's an issue with the financing. So you don't have patient financing that's willing to have you fail over and over and over again to make sure you're getting to the right product that will then ultimately succeed in market. I actually find sometimes that they'd rather get the wrong product out because they've got the money to do it right now.
Well, that's wrong.
Yeah.
But how do you deal with the kind of ensuring your financing is patient through that process?
Well, I mean, the way we do it is we ring-fence the resources during the planning and forecasting period, right? And so I created a group called TDI, which is Technology, Design, and Innovation, and their sole function, and they have resources and they have budget, is to do those sorts of things. Now, I say fail fast. I don't say fail often, right? You're hoping that 1 out of 3 ideas is going to be a hit, right? And
if all of your ideas are failing, that's a different problem.
That's a different problem, right? No, but truly, it is more of a cultural mind shift than it is about failing all the time, right? So if people feel free to try things, then the amount of things that come out of that group that are successful is much higher than you'd think, right? But it's willing to put your neck on the line and knowing that the chop isn't going to come.
Yeah. Well. And for us, the way that we, you're right, that is an issue. We're private, so for us, it's less of an issue. But our board would like to, make money on things too. So for me, it's staying close with the board and actually bringing them along on the journey. Not necessarily, and I guess I'm probably fortunate that I spend a lot of time with board guys, but if all the board communication is through the CFO, that's a problem.
Yep.
That's a problem. You have to be able to, explain to them, what you're doing, why you're doing it, what the roadmap looks like. Yeah. You share your failures, and you're really honest about that, and you share your successes, and hopefully you have a lot more of the latter than the former.
Well,
the other side of security, when you're trying to get buy-in to go up into the cloud, what's the magic answer to get the unbelievers off the dime?
Chances are your HRIS system is already in the cloud. They just don't know it.
Yeah.
Oracle.
Yeah.
So their payroll's in the cloud. If they're using ADP, it's in the cloud.
Yeah.
Right?
You're already there.
For for us, it hasn't been that much of an issue. For whatever reason, as we've taken the board through this sort of thing, they're actually really supportive. They'd like us to be going faster and moving more stuff to the cloud. So I actually have to dial them back a little bit.
Yeah.
It probably helps that they are in fact transforming their whole their organization, driving all their stuff into the cloud. So it makes that, in that sense, I've got a little bit of an easier, gig than others might.
Yeah.
But we also work in regulated in some parts. We have some stuff where we work with more regulated industries. And the other thing you can point out is that for most of the cloud companies that we work with, their level of security certification is greater than ours. Amazon's doing a project to run all of the CIA's back-end infrastructure. I guarantee you they have tighter security requirements than we do.
Other questions? Since there's already been a reference to the quote about keep calm and drink wine.
I'm going to pre-apologize. I'm going to bolt as soon as this is over. I can't hang around and chat. I've got a flight that I'm going to try and grab. But please, I'll leave some cards on the chair here. Please feel free to follow up via email or phone if you like.
And I'll answer all of David's questions.
That's right. He'll answer them better anyway.
Can I say, it struck me listening to the two of you, first of all, it's wonderful. Your perspectives are so professional and gentle and thoughtful. It occurred to me that sort of what you're talking about is a metaphor to how to live well, never mind a metaphor for technology. So it's like, if you were to do all these things in your personal life, you'd be much happier. I'm just saying. So, the technology is definitely, goes beyond just, whether you're in the cloud or not, but really wonderful perspectives. And I'm really thankful that you both came to talk about this.
Thank you for having us.
So
Thank you.
Really, really nice.
It's fun.
Yeah, travel safely getting back.
I really like